Good evening, everyone. We'll begin in just a moment. Welcome to our Valley Beth Shalom Synagogue page. And I'm Rabbi Joshua Hoffman, and I'll be teaching a class entitled Prayer Mastery, the High Holiday Liturgy version. And we'll be discussing the Rosh Hashanah prayers in just a few moments. Welcome. Wonderful. I think we got it all. So good evening, friends. Welcome. Once again, I'm Joshua Hoffman, one of the rabbis of Valley Beth Shalom, and honored to teach you tonight for tuning in and sharing the learning journey with those who have been participating in a class that began in June and is continuing through September, entitled Prayer Mastery. And we have discussed everything from the origins of Jewish prayer and why pray and what happens when we do with difficult prayers and how to reinterpret prayers for our modern idiom, and also how to access some of the ancient wisdom and powerful words and ideas and concepts that Jewish prayer has cultivated throughout the generations. And tonight we're going to take special focus on the high holiday prayers. And last week, for you that was tuning in, we discussed kind of like what is different or unique about high holiday prayers in general, and what is virtually the same, what you're going to find anytime that you open up a prayer book, and even if it's the holiest day of the year, like Yom Kippur. And we'll also have some of those fundamental basic prayers that we have discussed before. But tonight is a beginning to an exploration of all of the unique additions that have made the Machzor, which is the special book that we use in celebration of high holidays. It's the one we use at Valley Beth Shalom. The one that I'm going to be referring to is Machzor Lev Shalem. This is actually a publisher's copy, and it's a much smaller book. This is so much to carry around. But Lev Shalem is the one published by the Rabbinical Assembly, and it has beautiful, beautiful words, which I'm going to be sharing with you this evening. So our focus is first on the goal of praying during the high holidays. And I think that there are multi-layers of experience that are goals that are accomplished, certainly in North American communities, and why Rosh Hashanah has become one of the events that is the most well-attended, if you will, a sense of obligation that many Jews feel for an opportunity to check in to their Jewish identity and their Jewish community. And it really is, in many respects, an entire economy. It's an entire system of belonging, as so many congregations use the model of membership as a catalyst to encourage members of their community to renew their commitment to the congregation right around the time that the high holidays begin. And for many congregations, you have to have a ticket to enter into the prayers, which is such an extraordinary experience. I roll my eyes with it because it's a model that is transforming before our very eyes. And here we are in Southern California, and we are approaching these high holidays quite differently than we have in years past. Certainly we have these models that we're going to continue to maintain to the best of our ability. The idea that belonging and a commitment to community far surpasses the entrance that it is required to come and pay your tribute or to check in or to see the people that you haven't seen since a year past when you come to a Rosh Hashanah or a Yom Kippur service. But that what's happening is really a journey that is taking place over almost 2 months. And it really began a few weeks ago when we gathered as a community in the middle of the summer, in the heat of the summer, in which we commemorated the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem and these great catastrophes that the Jewish people have suffered from throughout the years. And our prayers began from that place of recognizing that the most elegant constructions of our identity, the most powerful visions that we can create for ourselves, the most compelling narrative that we write of our lives and our definitions of success and our modalities of being and relating into the world are merely constructs. They're constructs that have been given to us from our parents. They're constructs that we have created for ourselves in our own sense of identification and independence in the world. They're constructs that have been transmitted from generation to generation. The idea that we have a Jewish identity, a Jewish soul, and that somehow our identity embodies a certain set of values or a certain way of being. All of that is thrust into the air. It is crumbled as the rocks of the temple fell and crumbled on the earth below as the flames engulfed what was once the centerpiece of Jewish worship and Jewish identity in Jerusalem. And the same kind of tearing down of that experience is what we also experience when Tisha B'Av occurs. And from that moment, which was just a few weeks ago, through all the way to Sukkot, some would argue, about the period of 2 months, maybe a little bit more than 2 months, that during that time, what's taking place is a complete transformation of the self. That idea is kind of foreign to us in our modern idiom. I think that we've been exposed in so many ways to ideas and examples of how the self is the most important location, source of truth in the world. We've been rushing headlong into our modern sense of the world, in which we identify ourselves, we create identities. We are empowered by the world that feeds us all kinds of incentives to create our own identities. That through that process, generation after generation, we've reached the conclusion that the only source of truth is that which we define in ourselves. There may be truth that exists out beyond us, but it's only verified by what we experience in ourselves. This period of destruction, of rebuilding, and of transformation that Jews take a part of at this time of year is this now incredibly audacious idea that the source of truth does not exist within us. That when we construct our identities based on a sense of our own ability to create and to fulfill our own destinies without anyone else's input, if we don't want it, is completely and totally manufactured. In Southern California, we live in Hollywood. Hollywood is this same idea that with a very well-placed camera and some very carefully scripted words, identities can be created. And we live almost in the worlds of fantasy. We are so deeply influenced by the way that we see life projected before us on screens. We empathize and we relate. We even try to emulate those lives. We learn the wisdom of the experience of someone who is projected on the screen. That impact upon us changes us. The Jewish tradition with this 2-month journey that we're embarking upon is similar in that it is setting a stage. We are the producers, we are the directors, we are the actors, we are the post-production editors, and we are the merchandisers that sell the product with our smiling faces of our lives. And this time of year is the time that just for a few minutes, we actually project ourselves onto the big screen. And we take a good look and we ask ourselves, is that the story that we want to tell? Is that the movie that we want to watch? That idea that we have crafted the world, that we've crafted it a part of a year in which we take special time to ask ourselves the questions of whether or not we are the people that we imagine ourselves to be, or if there is something that we can change, we can correct, we can seek deeper and reach further into the world to transform us. If that possibility is there, then we may very well set up a plan to accomplish that. The idea that the self begins to expand, that in order for us to change, we must enlarge this sense of who we are. We must look at ourselves on a big screen and see if that's the movie that we want to watch. That kind of work in Jewish tradition has beautiful words, it has beautiful images, it has something so very powerful that if we give permission to go on the journey with those words, we may very well accomplish the change that we envision, we hope, we dream for ourselves to be. That is the beginning of the prayers that we engage in when we gather together. This year, using the image of a production company is going to be very much a screen version of Rosh Hashanah. We're not going to get to sit in pews, and we're not going to have people talking at us and a choir singing at us and someone urging us on to participate with our own words. We'll have that projected through the screen, but the response is all up to you. That's something that is kind of a gift this year and may be kind of difficult for us. So what I propose is that we spend the next 4 or 5 weeks really taking a look at what we're saying, so that when we actually say it, when we're actually given the opportunity to express it with a sense of intention, a sense of mindfulness, even a sense of hope and promise, that when we do that, not only do we mean it, but we have a plan in which to fulfill it and realize it. That is our introduction to the Musaf Amidah. That is the centerpiece of the Rosh Hashanah prayers. And I'm going to now share my screen so that you can see some of the texts that we have for us to explore tonight. There we go. I hope you can see it. And I'm going to make that a very big screen. Okay. So Rosh Hashanah is, as I've tagged it, we are the directors of our fate. It is the great production. It's the Hollywood blockbuster of our lives. And the centerpiece of the Rosh Hashanah holiday is the Musaf Amidah. Musaf means additional, and it's a special. The reason that it's been used as that part of the prayer service is because not only did it have in the times in which the temple existed, a certain obligation of unique sacrifices that were brought. But it was also the time of the community. Rosh Hashanah is the quintessential communal moment. It is the moment when we enlarge ourselves to make room for others, to use metaphors to help us grow ourselves. And it's also the time in which our soul can be present. And our soul does not exist without the reflection of our soul in others. That's the work that we have before us. And all the more so when we're not doing it in person with people sitting right next to us. We can't kibitz about whether the sermon was a good one or a bad one, or how long it was going to take before Rosh Hashanah lunch began. So I want us to listen to some words about directors and our fate. And I found this from Sun Tzu, the great Chinese philosopher. Be extremely subtle, he writes, even to the point of formlessness. Be extremely mysterious, even to the point of soundlessness. Thereby, you can be the director of the opponent's fate. Now, what I read in this, and what I hope you read in this as well, is first of all, the act is to diminish our sense of self. If our self is going to be transformed, we certainly can't take directions from ourselves because ourselves are hungry, they're tired, they're lazy, they're resistant, they're questioning the attire of the person that is sitting 2 rows and 2 seats over, and they're questioning whether we've actually cleaned our teeth well enough, or if maybe something was stuck in there from breakfast. Ourselves are in our way. They are a throbbing voice within our heads telling us to do everything else but to be our souls. So the art here is to be able to diminish the self. Be extremely subtle, he writes, even to the point of formlessness. That means there's nothing that yourself is reading into these prayers that gives you legitimacy, rationale, exemption from participation, and even from reaction to them. Every prayer is meant to be heard and understood. Be extremely mysterious, even to the point of soundlessness. The idea is that it's not yourself that's giving the answers. It's the soul. And so thereby, you could be the director of the opponent. And here I read it as the self's fate. If you are going to transform the self, the first thing that you have to do is to get the self out of the way. Sounds difficult, but we'll understand a little bit more as we go further. Just to give us another couple quotes about being directors. Voyeurism is a director's job description. It's an artist's too. There's something about taking a step back and looking at the masterpiece of your life. It's a canvas that's seemingly blank, but there are brushstrokes of life. Some of them have been painted by you, and some have been painted by others, and some have been painted by you in reaction to others. This is an opportunity for you to step back and take a look at the masterpiece that is your life. And like an artist, to make the decisions of where the next brushstrokes go. Finally, another really interesting quote is from Rabbi Shapira. He was the Warsaw-Ghetto Rebbe. So he's writing this about 1941. The Eish Kodesh was the work that he published while he was in the ghetto. And beautiful, beautiful rabbinic wisdom. So he writes, the time for teshuvah is Rosh Hashanah. Teshuvah we normally translate as repentance, but I want you to just read it as change. The time for change is Rosh Hashanah, the anniversary of the creation of the world. Creation ex nihilo. There was nothing, and then God said, let there be light. And we celebrate that moment in which God proclaimed light into the universe. And on that day, we also create, so says Rabbi Shapiro, tshuva, a sense of change, a sense of recreation, a sense of returning to perhaps our soul. And so that's why Rosh Hashanah, the celebration of the creation of the world, is also the time that we begin teshuvah. So let me pause there for a second, because I know I threw a whole bunch of words and thoughts and ideas about everything that we're looking at. And let me see if anybody has any comments. Thank you to all my friends that are here. And if you have anything to add, please add. Oh, where'd it go? Was it? It did. Hold on just a moment, folks. So far, so good. Okay. So let's go back and study more of our text. Okay, get it correct. Close the window down inadvertently. So now I have to open it back up. There we go. Okay. So to continue on from this idea that the self is the source of truth, and that what we've just described here is that in order for us to discover the source of truth, we have to find the place where our self is not a participant in the direction of our faith. As Sun Tzu says, we have to be subtle and mysterious. We have to diminish the self. We have to be artistic about it, and we have to be creative about it. All of those things require a certain diminution of the self. The idea that we are the masters of our truth, and so therefore we enter into a prayer space considering that our truth is the ultimate truth, and we're not going to be moved by any of the ideas unless we scream and yell and we berate and we diminish and we push everybody into a corner where they can no longer possibly think of themselves as the arbiters of their own truth. That without that excruciating punitive effort, the self is not going to pay attention to anything. Listen to what Yehuda Amichai writes. What a beautiful piece of poetry. It's one of my favorite poets ever, and he certainly captures so many meaningful ideas. So look at what he writes. He says, I believe, I assert with absolute faith that prayers preceded God. Prayers created God. God created humans. Humans create prayers that create God, who creates humanity. So it's a little bit confusing. I believe that prayers preceded God, he says. In other words, what we're talking about here is that when we read all of this language about God as being the sovereign of all sovereigns, the God that has the power to hold our fate in its hands, and we shudder when we think about those words that we'll recite throughout our prayers, who will live and who will die. And the idea that that kind of control exists beyond us, at first glance seems an impossibility. Because we know that there are so many things that we can do to extend life, to fight disease, to change the course of our behavior. And we don't do it with the grace or the attitude that it happens because of some other force that has caused that change. It's all within us. We're the ones that created God in that respect. So how do you define God? God creates humanity, says Amichai. And humanity is something extraordinarily different than a human being. It is the betweenness of people. It is the connection that people experience in their presence of each other. And our humanity is most well expressed when we aren't imposing ourself upon the other, but when we have created space for that which exists between myself and the other to be something sacred, something dignified, something kind, something gentle, something joyful, something loving, something comforting. All of those behaviors, according to Amichai, and what I invite you to consider tonight, they are God. That is what God experience is. And as you look at the words that we read in the Machzor, I want to invite you to think not of God as an entity that exists beyond our realm of experience, but it is absolutely and entirely the realm of experience and interpretation of our experience that we can make sense of within us as individuals and as a community. In order to do that, the self, the ego, the Yetzer Hara, whichever one you want to use as a definition, must be excluded from that relationship. And so this is the work that we have to accomplish. The first thing that I want to share with you tonight is one of the great prayers called V'chol Ma'aminim. In our congregation, we sing it, V'chol Ma'aminim, Ma'aminim Shehu, V'chol Ma'aminim, Ma'aminim Shehu. And you know what? We all love to sing the chorus, but how many of us really know what it is that we're saying? Right? I mean, I caught myself just being swept up in a beautiful melody and realizing that it's almost as if it doesn't matter what's being said because the melody is just making me feel sweet and connected. The words V'chol Ma'aminim mean we believe. And they immediately precede the centerpiece of the Rosh Hashanah prayer liturgy, the Malchuyot, Zichronot, and Shofarot, or the sovereignty and the period process of remembrance and the process of recreation. Or reframe it as creation, redemption, and revelation and redemption. Those are three popular modalities of these three elements of the Musaf prayers. V'chol Ma'aminim comes right before them. And look at the words of what they say. This is just an excerpt of it. God considers the good of all those who keep God in mind. We believe that God is mindful of the covenant. God carves out the lifespan of all that lives. We believe that God is living and eternal. God's goodness flows to the deserving and to the understanding. We believe that God is good to all. Now imagine just for a moment, as I've tried to introduce to you, that when we're talking about our prayers being the creations of God, then that means that the God that we're talking about is our creation. So what it says is just, I invite you to reread it this way. There's many different layers of theology that we can play with this, but I want you to read it this way. If we are the creations of God, but also we create God in this moment, when it says God considers the good, we consider the good of all those who keep God in mind. We consider those who keep each other in mind. We believe that God, this part of us, is mindful of the covenant. We believe that we carve out the lifespan of all that lives. We believe that the part of us that is sacred is living and eternal. God's goodness flows to the deserving and to the understanding. We believe that God is good to all. Same kind of thinking here. B'chol ma'aminim is, oops, hold on a second, great. In order for us to get into this place where we're going to give permission for us to allow ourselves not to be the directors, and we cease to be the directors, and we allow ourselves to be directed because there is a bigger picture. There's something larger than us that is unfolding before us. The first thing that we say is we believe that that's possible. And this isn't just a hedge of your bets. How do we believe that it's possible? Because everything that we believe that is good and mindful, that is eternal, deserving and understanding, and that is good to all, well, that's exactly the kind of people that we hope to be in every day in our lives. And this journey is an opportunity for us to check in and to confirm that that is indeed who we are meant to be. It's our lives on the big screen. Moving on into the three parts of the Musaf Amidah prayers. You have Malchuyot, which is sovereignty, or in the concept of creation. You have Zichronot, or remembrances, and it's the concept of revelation or brit, covenantal relationship. And you have Shofarot, which is redemption, the idea that God took Bnei Yisrael out of the house of bondage and redeemed them, brought them to the land of Israel, and that redemption continually unfolds, for the Jewish people, but it's also a sense of personal redemption. It's a sense of transformation. And so let's read a little bit about that. So Malchuyot has one of the things, maybe because it doesn't have a good melody, that we don't often read it in the Machzor, but it's really, really good stuff. You'll find it in every traditional Machzor. You'll find it in this one, and when you use this one, you'll find it in the Machzor Lev Shalem, if you find it in that one, or whatever Machzor that you choose, you'll find it. So it says Melech Elyon, which means the God Most High, okay? And in it, this is just an excerpt. We read, the impoverished earthly sovereign is chased by exhaustion, falls into a deep sleep, and is enveloped in chaos. How long can that rule last? But the sovereign on high, Melech Elyon, whose power is eternal, who's glorious forever, and who is justly praised forever, will rule forever and ever. The idea that the holidays are a sense of fealty, a sense of loyalty to the self, the enlargement of the self. There is something bigger than us, and we are in awe. It's that mysterious, subtle curiosity and formlessness that enables us to be a part of something bigger. Not only will result, as Sun Tzu taught us, to enable us to be the directors of this faith, but the first stop is to recognize that we are formless. We are perhaps a part of something that is so grand and so all-encompassing that our self not only cannot contain it, but we are incapable of fully containing it. Our failure to fully contain it is why we come in this moment and we recognize that there is more of us yet to grow. Melech Elyon teaches us that. Now, in the Malchuyot prayers, we recite 10 verses, and each of the parts they're sort of they're divided up by 10 verses, from 3 from the Torah, 3 from the prophetic words, and 3 from the written words, 3 from the writings, like the Psalms, which is a way for us to encompass the entirety of the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, and to make sure that we are in some way in this holiday season really touching on all of the great pieces of wisdom that have emerged and flowed from the first moments of revelation of Torah, even throughout the times of the biblical period until today. And in the Malchuyot prayers, we recite the Shema. So we've already recited the Shema twice we would have recited it in the morning prayers, the Shachari prayers, and we would have recited it when we took out the Torah and we recited the Torah. And this is a third time. So first of all, the idea that we're saying one thing 3 times lets you know that this is a very, very important prayer. It's an important idea. And look at the words, Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai alone. We say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. It is an affirmation that if there is any king for whom we express loyalty to, it is going to be this sovereign on high, this sort of intangible enlargement of the self greater than any possible human being could ever be, because the whole concept of perfection is something that only exists in the realm of this otherness. And then it reads just at the end, purify our hearts to serve you truly, for you are the God of truth, and your word is true, eternal and unchanging. Baruch atah Adonai, ruler of all the earth, who makes the people Yisrael and the day of remembrance, Yom HaZikaron, holy, Kodesh. That's the Malchiyot part of the prayer. The idea that we are expressing a sense of loyalty to a sovereign that isn't of flesh and blood. And there's historical evidence that this time of year, the late summer months, the time in which there is an accounting of the people in the Babylonian era, and they would go and profess their loyalty to the king of Babylon at that time, that the Jewish people said, no, we have, or yes, we have a king as well, but our king is the sovereign, most holy upon high. And so we are going to demonstrate our loyalty to that, because that loyalty is the expansion of ourselves. And as I think we've tried to build up, it is the idea that there is something larger than ourselves. And we say with great pride that that which is larger than ourselves is the most expansive sense of being that we could possibly imagine. We can't even imagine it. And that's what makes Judaism such a great contribution to the world, because we expand it beyond any understand the invisible nature of the human experience, which is things that not only are indescribable, like joy or like dancing, as I've referred so often to before, but the sort of invisible nature of possibility, tomorrow, a future, a sense of hope, a sense of healing, a sense of betterness in the world that will not be something based on our experience of the moment, but we have a hope, hatikva, that the world will be better. That contribution that the Jewish people have brought to the world is what propels us and animates us. And even with great experiences of destruction and suffering that might have befallen our people throughout the generations, it's our sense of hope that enables us to see that there is something larger and there's something bigger than ourselves. Rosh Hashanah holiday is the wonderful time when we pay attention to check in and say, where has our self, the narrowness of our identity, where has that prevented us from seeing that which is bigger than ourselves? And this prayer, Melech Elyon, and the last one it says, right, that God is the ruler of all the earth and with blessing has blessed the Jewish people and this very special day and enabled us to do the work that we aspire to do and to achieve throughout the holidays. That's Malchiyot. Any comments so far? Hopefully everybody's okay. Let's jump into the next level of text. The second section is called Zichronot. Zichronot literally means remembrance, but here it's covenant. It's a covenantal memory. The idea that once we get this sense that we say the Shema, Adonai is God, our God, and Adonai is alone. It's not only me and the person sitting next to me. It's not only the people that are a part of my community. It's not only the people that I can think about, but it's also those who came before me, and it's going to be those who succeed me or follow. And that recognition at this moment is crucial because we've just completely negated ourselves. We've negated our ego. We've negated our Yetzer Hara. We've completely just said that we are not the directors of the masterpieces of our lives. And you are the director and the masterpiece of our lives because you have created the masterpiece of existence. You are the one in your creation who has given us, your people, this day to remember that there is something bigger than ourselves. So in that section, pay close attention as we read. Look at the move that's being made. Nothing is forgotten in your awe-inspiring presence. Nothing concealed from your gaze. You remember every deed, and nothing in creation can be hidden from you. Everything is revealed and known to you, Adonai, our God. You see to the end of time. This is what we say when we go through the Musaf prayers, and this concept of saying that nothing is forgotten is a further proof and recognition of how limited ourselves are. So on the one hand, we have many, many times in which we conveniently forget all of the failures that we have in our lives, or the shortcomings, or the vices, or the unseemly behaviors that maybe make other people uncomfortable, or maybe unseemly behaviors that we recognize make us uncomfortable, but we haven't yet mustered up the power and the will to do anything about it. None of that is forgotten. And then there's still even the things that are true about our earthly existence and about the inconceivable surprise of living, which is that we do forget that there are things of our childhood and of our adulthood and of moments that we may have regretted in the moment, but we forgot because, psychologically we block them out. Traumas that we've experienced that we blocked out. But joys in our experience that begin to diminish over time. I always thought, for example, I would never forget every coo and every giggle and every smelly, poopy diaper that my children had and gave to me as gifts in their young upbringing. But you forget. You forget. You forget the sleepless nights. You forget the agony of not satisfying the child when it cries incessantly. You forget that sometimes things were messy and gross and yucky. You may have an idea of it, but you don't remember everything. Here is a prayer that says nothing is forgotten, which is to say that if we are in the place in which we have negated ourselves and nothing is forgotten, then that means that there's a certain remembering that needs to take place. There's a certain reconstruction that needs to take place. And in that reconstruction, that rebuilding of memory, we have these words of prayer to guide us. So look at what it says. You have always remembered that which has been forgotten, for there is no forgetting in your realm. So on this day, in your great mercy, remember the binding of Isaac for the sake of his descendants. Baruch atah Adonai, who remembers the covenant. So the prayer here is, you've always remembered that's what's been forgotten. But we want you to remember something about us. We want you to remember that there was once upon a time, one of ours, our great patriarch and his son, that you tested, and in their absolute faith, you prevented your most faithful servant from taking the life of his son. Because that happened once, God, you have to remember our relationship. Because we may talk to you, God, about all the great things that we accomplished and all the things that are worthy of reward and recognition and blessing and celebration. And we may hope that you don't see the fact that we're a little broken, we're a little stinky, we're a little less than perfect. But you don't forget any of that. And so in order for us to move forward, what we need from you is to remember that we are in covenant. Remember that we've been in relationship. It's about what we do together, God. The first step is to say, it's bigger than me. And so therefore, I am making space for what we call God. Call God a higher self. Call God the best actions that you have. Call God the source of life and will in the universe that has a purpose for you, a purpose for me in particular. Call it what you will. Whatever you call it, the first step is to say, I am in relationship to it. And the next step as we get to this place is to say, we are in this together. Covenantal relationship is not unilateral. It's not unidirectional. It's not a monotonous soliloquy of commands and obedience. We are in partnership. It is the most liberating concept that Judaism has to offer. When we come to pray with our God, we will come to recognize that there are changes that we need to make. There are improvements that we seek to implement in our lives. There's a plan for us and how we continue to see ourselves. But the reminder, actually the invitation for us is that we're in this together is so beautiful. It's so loving. And it's so audacious. It's so uncharacteristically audacious. No one would go to somebody who is in a great position of authority and say, we're in this together. This whole sense of authority simply says that you're in power and I'm going to do what you say. I may not like it. I may talk about you behind your back. I may try to do some things to undermine you along the way, but you're in charge. This is the complete opposite. You're in charge, but we're in relationship. And the idea that when we open up the prayer book, and we're talking about this journey of transforming the self, the transformation begins when we recognize that we're in partnership. That means that we have to renew our responsibilities. We have to fulfill our part of the covenant. We have to recognize that there is a relationship there. We have to pray that relationship will be honored on one end of the relationship, and we have to do our part to fulfill that honor, fulfill that responsibility as well. That brings us to the third piece, the middle part of the Musaf Amidah. Remember, creation or sovereignty, memory or revelation of relationship. And now we move to what's called the shofarot part, the sense of redemption. Custom has it that we recite, we blow the shofar 100 times. Aside from it being just an incredibly powerful, shuddering sound, a wake-up call to rise us into awareness of this relationship and connection that exists, that it does exist, and that we are responsible to it in some way and must renew our responsibility to it this way. The 100 blasts give us a sense that once we are awake, we have a responsibility. We have somewhere to go. We're on the journey together. That's what we just said. So now where are we going? Let's read together. So it says, all of creation trembled in awe as you, our sovereign, made yourself known on Mount Sinai, teaching your people Torah and mitzvot. For you hear the sound of the shofar and attend to its splintered call. You are beyond compare. Baruch atah Adonai, who listens with compassion to the sounds of the splintered call of your people Yisrael. All of creation trembled in awe as you made yourself known at Mount Sinai. That is the first two parts. Everything recognizes that when the voice entered into the world and gave the people Torah and mitzvot, that was a pinnacle moment. It is the centerpiece of the Torah. It is the concept that we as Jews hold on to, whether we consider that revelatory moment to be something that was divinely given, literally as it was written, or whether it was inspired, as we can also read that it was something powerful that took place, but it was an inspiration that led to the record keeping that created the Torah, or it is exclusively a human project, like Yuda Amichai would have it, that we're the ones who prayed God into being, and that with our prayers, we realize that God creates humanity, that the betweenness, the relationships that we build, the concepts and the responsibilities that we fulfill, that we realize and fulfill, that becomes God's creation in the world. And that's why it says, teaching your people Torah and mitzvot. So the end concept of the shofar, when you're sitting there and praying, and my God, there's so many words, it's so unbelievably overwhelming. It's easy to get distracted. All the more so in the 21st century, when 7 minutes is the maximum amount of time that anybody pays attention to a screen. So if you're the Hollywood producer of the high holidays experience of your life, and you're looking at yourself on the big screen, the fact that you only have 7 minutes of attention seems to be very depressing, but also very challenging. So what are the things that you need to know if that's what you're trying to get in the shortest amount of time that your attention will allow you to sustain? The world is bigger than you and yourself. And when you see that you are in yourself, those who came before you have been in relationship with that which has been bigger than themselves. They were even as courageous as to take their child and to offer them up as a sacrifice in loyalty to that which was bigger than themselves. Because that relationship did not demand that sacrifice, but enabled each and every succeeding generation to continue its relationship with that bigger sense of self, we are here today with the sense of Torah, a sense of teaching, wisdom, a sense of behavior, a sense of responsibility, a sense of hope that comes through the tradition that has been recorded in the books of the Bible, that has been recorded in the books of the rabbis, that is recorded each and every generation, even each and every day. And those who are committed to that reach this blessing. Listen to the blessing again. For you hear the sound of the shofar. You attend to its splintered call. We are calling out. We've got the mitzvot. We've got the Torah. We are not fully complete without being in relationship with you. There is no perfection without you in it. You are beyond compare. So we praise you, Baruch atah Adonai, who listens with compassion to the sounds of the splintered call of your people, Yisrael. You listen with compassion. If God can listen with compassion, then maybe we can listen with compassion. Because maybe our sense of self is so grizzled and hardened from the world that has forced us to be clever, to be the brightest, to be the fastest and most responsive, to be the most productive, to be the most popular, the most beloved person. That sense of self can become calcified, hardened. It can be impenetrable. But if we open ourselves up, if we open up and realize that there are still more paintbrushes and brush strokes, more artistic twists on the masterpiece of our life, then we pray that that journey, the action of, or the privilege of taking a paintbrush and beginning to change the masterpiece of our life is given to us with compassion, with love. Not with arms folded and said, you better make it the best looking painting that you can make. Not looking with a punitive voice and a finger wagging and saying, you need to do more mitzvot, but compassion and love to say that wherever you are is the journey that your soul needs to take for this year at this time. And it begins with making yourself bigger. And it begins with remembering where you came from. And it concludes with you moving into action to paint the brushstrokes of your life, to paint that, to film the great film of your life, to be the director once again, but this time with a little bit more compassion, just like you've prayed, with a little bit more understanding that the world is bigger than you think it is, with a little bit more love that recognizes that those who have made the journey before us have carried great wisdom and a great value from the responsibilities that we've taken on as Jewish human beings throughout the generations, to act with righteousness, to act with a sense of justice, to act with a sense of care and compassion for all those, for the neglected and the vulnerable and the invisible among us. And also to act for the ones that we love the most, to pray for their healing, to pray for their strength, to pray that they are lifted up and can become the successful people that they envision themselves to be. So that you, as being the director of your new soul, that this holiday invites you to meet and to explore and to celebrate, that your new soul and the new direction that it takes is one that is attended not by shofar blasts of wakening up, but attended by shofar blasts of triumphant heralding of a new era, a new year, a year of blessing, a year of peace, and a year of sweetness. If you can accomplish a little bit of this in your prayers, it's not just about reading what's happening in the book, but if you can begin to think about the work that you are undertaking over these next 2 months, and to know that you're talking about first tearing down the walls of the world that was created in this past year, and recognizing that you're not yet the fully realized self that you know that you're capable of being or that you need to be. And that you can take a journey with humility and be able to open yourself up to say that there is something bigger than you. That you can reach that point when we conclude with Sukkot and we're sitting in our new home and we're enjoying, hopefully God willing, with friends, the newness of our lives, that we really do receive the blessings that we deserve, and that we can enjoy them and share them with friends. Thank you so much for being a part of the learning class tonight. It's nice to see everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And please come back next week. We're going to be moving into Yom Kippur. We're going to talk about the centerpiece of Yom Kippur, which is the confessionals, the viduim as they're called. And we're going to talk all about their origins and why they are a part of the Yom Kippur holiday, because it does say that we're supposed to afflict our souls. But how that became the particular journey that we make on the holiday is worthy of great exploration and understanding. So I hope that you've enjoyed the unpacking of the prayers that we've studied tonight. And there'll be lots of great information to participate in the class. Please share this great wisdom if you find the great wisdom with friends. That's a wonderful thing for all of us to share. Have a good night. Thanks so much for tuning in. Take care.